The morning of October 15th started like any other Thursday in the household. Sarah was rushing around the kitchen, packing lunches while her coffee grew cold on the counter. Her husband David was already dressed for work, checking his phone for the 100th time. Their two kids and Jake were arguing over the last Pop-Tart, and there in the middle of all the chaos sat Max, a 13-year-old golden retriever with a graying muzzle and the kindest eyes you'd ever seen. Max had been with Sarah longer than her marriage, longer than her kids had been alive, longer than she'd lived in this house. She'd gotten him during the darkest period of her life, right after her first marriage fell apart. Back then, she was living in a tiny apartment, crying herself to sleep most nights, wondering if she'd ever feel whole again. Then one Saturday, almost on impulse, she'd walked into an animal shelter just to look around. That's where she found him, a pudgy 8-week-old puppy with paws too big for his body and a tail that never stopped wagging. The shelter volunteer told her he'd been there for 3 weeks, which was unusual for golden retriever puppies. "He's been passed over a lot," the young woman had said sadly. "People say he's not energetic enough, not playful enough, but I think he's just observant, like he's waiting for the right person." When Sarah knelt down, the puppy had walked straight to her, pressed his little head against her knee, and looked up at her with eyes that seemed to say, "I've been waiting for you." She signed the adoption papers before she could talk herself out of it, naming him Max after her late grandfather who'd always made her feel safe. Now, 13 years later, Max was the one constant in a life that had transformed completely. He'd been there when she met David at a friend's barbecue 3 years after her divorce. David had won her over partly because of how he'd immediately sat on the floor to pet Max, not caring about the dog hair on his expensive jeans. Max had been the ring bearer at their wedding, walking down the aisle with the rings attached to his collar, his tail wagging proudly. He'd been there when was born, gently sniffing the tiny bundle Sarah brought home from the hospital, and then positioning himself next to the crib as if to say, "I'm on guard duty now." He did the same thing when Jake arrived 2 years later. The kids had learned to walk by holding onto Max's fur, had used him as a pillow during movie nights, and had told him secrets they wouldn't tell anyone else. But lately, Sarah had noticed the changes. Max moved slower now, his back legs sometimes trembling when he stood. He slept more, ate less, and those bright, intelligent eyes sometimes seemed clouded with confusion. The vet had said it was normal for his age, arthritis, some cognitive decline, the natural process of growing old. "He's got good quality of life still," doctor had assured them during the last checkup. "Just keep him comfortable and enjoy the time you have left." Sarah tried not to think about that phrase too much. The time you have left. She knew it was coming eventually. Max was elderly by dog standards, and golden retrievers typically lived 12 to 14 years. But knowing something intellectually and accepting it emotionally were two entirely different things. How do you prepare to say goodbye to someone who's been your anchor through everything? That Thursday morning, Max followed his usual routine. He waited patiently by his chair for dropped cereal. She was a notoriously messy eater, and Max had learned years ago that breakfast time meant treats. Then he stationed himself by the door to say goodbye to everyone as they left. It was his job, his purpose. Every member of his pack needed to be accounted for, needed to receive a goodbye sniff and a tail wag before they ventured into the world. Sarah kissed the top of his head before heading out, breathing in that familiar dog smell that had become synonymous with home. "Be good, old man. I'll be home at 3. Max's tail wagged in response, his eyes following her to the door. David left for work around 8:30, giving Max an absent-minded pat on the head as he grabbed his briefcase. The kids' bus came at 8:45, and both and Jake gave Max extra-long hugs before running out the door. "Love you," called back. And Max, as he always did, settled into his favorite spot by the living room window to watch the neighborhood come to life. He'd sit there for hours, keeping guard over his territory, barking occasionally at passing dogs or squirrels that dared to venture too close to his yard. His hearing wasn't what it used to be, and his vision was getting cloudy, but his sense of duty remained as strong as ever. The house was quiet now, the way it always was during weekday mornings. The only sounds were the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of the old house settling, and Max's gentle snoring when he inevitably dozed off in his sunny spot. Max dreamed, as old dogs do, of younger days. In his dreams, his legs didn't ache, and he could run for hours chasing tennis balls that Sarah threw in endless succession. In his dreams, he could still jump onto the bed without needing David's help, could still climb the stairs without pausing halfway up to catch his breath. In his dreams, he was still the young, strong protector of his pack. He had no way of knowing that this peaceful morning would be his last, that within hours, everything would change in a single terrible moment, that the family he'd devoted his entire life to protecting would soon be faced with an impossible choice, one that would test the very bounds of their love for him. Max dozed by the window, the October sun warming his aging bones, completely unaware that his final chapter was about to begin. Around 2:30 that afternoon, David left his office early. His last meeting had been canceled, the client had called in sick, and for once he decided not to fill the unexpected free time with more work. It was a beautiful fall day, the kind that made him remember why they'd moved to Ohio in the first place. The trees were ablaze with color, reds and oranges and yellows so vibrant they almost looked artificial. There was that perfect crisp feeling in the air, cool enough for a light jacket but warm enough to enjoy being outside. David loosened his tie as he drove through the quiet suburban streets toward home. He was already planning the evening in his head. Maybe they could all go to Pumpkin Patch after he picked up the kids. Had been asking about it for weeks, and Jake would love the hayride. They could get hot apple cider, let the kids run through the corn maze, pick out pumpkins for carving. It would be a perfect family evening. He pulled onto their street, Maple Grove Drive, already picturing Sarah's surprised face when he walked in early. Maybe he'd suggest they order Chinese food for dinner, give her a break from cooking. God knows she deserved it, working full-time as a teacher and still managing to keep their household running smoothly. As he approached their house, the two-story colonial with the blue shutters and the flower bed Sarah meticulously maintained, David reached for his phone. He wanted to check the time, see if he should head straight to the school or if he had a few minutes to change out of his work clothes first. The screen showed 2:47 p.m. The kids got out at 3:15, so he had almost half an hour. He turned into their driveway, eyes on his phone, scrolling to his calendar app to confirm the school pickup time. In the back of his mind, he registered that he should probably replace that cracked paving stone near the garage. He'd been meaning to do it for months. Sarah had mentioned it could be a tripping hazard. David put the car in reverse, planning to back into the garage the way he always did. It made it easier to pull out in the morning. He glanced in the mirror. The driveway was clear. He started to back up slowly, still partially thinking about that paving stone, about the pumpkin patch, about whether they had enough cash for the entrance fee or if he'd need to stop at an ATM. That's when he heard it. The sound was something David would hear in his nightmares for years to come, a yelp of pure agony, high-pitched and desperate, that cut through the afternoon air like a knife. It was a sound so terrible, so filled with pain and terror, that David's body reacted before his brain fully processed what was happening. His foot slammed on the brakes so hard the car lurched forward. His hands were already shaking as he threw the transmission into park. No, please, God, no. David practically fell out of the car, his briefcase tumbling onto the driveway, papers scattering in the breeze. And there, behind his rear tire, was Max. The dog was lying on the pavement, his back legs twisted at an angle that made David's stomach turn. Max's beautiful golden fur was already matted with dirt and what looked like blood. But it was Max's eyes that would haunt David forever, those kind, trusting eyes that had always looked at him with such pure love and loyalty were now filled with confusion and agony. Max was whimpering, a sound David had never heard him make in 13 years. It was continuous, pitiful, the sound of a creature in unbearable pain who didn't understand why this was happening. The dog's front legs were scrabbling weakly against the pavement, as if he was trying to pull himself away, but his back legs wouldn't move. Couldn't move. No, 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 David heard himself saying over and over, his voice breaking, barely recognizable as his own. He dropped to his knees beside Max, his hands hovering over the dog, desperate to help but terrified of causing more damage. "I'm sorry, buddy. I'm so sorry. Oh God, I'm so sorry. I didn't see you. I didn't see you." How had Max gotten outside? The thought flashed through David's mind even as he was spiraling into panic. They always kept him inside during the day. Always. The front door had been locked when he left for work that morning. Unless... The lawn crew. They'd been scheduled to come today. They must have left the side gate open. Max must have wandered out, confused maybe, or chasing something. And David had been so distracted, so focused on his phone, so careless. Max's whimpering intensified. The dog was looking directly at David now, and the expression in those eyes was unmistakable. "Why? Why did you hurt me? Why won't you help me?" "I'm going to help you, buddy, I promise. Just hold on, please hold on." David's vision was blurring with tears. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely pull his phone from his pocket. He needed to call someone. The vet, Sarah, someone who would know what to do. The commotion had attracted attention. From next door came running from her garden, still holding her pruning shears. She was in her 70s, a retired nurse who'd lived on Maple Grove Drive longer than anyone else. She took one look at the scene, and her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, David, what happened?" She was already pulling out her own phone. "I'm calling Sarah." No, wait, but was already dialing. David's mind was racing. Sarah was at work. She was in the middle of teaching. This would destroy her, and it was all his fault. He looked back down at Max. The dog's breathing was rapid and shallow. A thin line of drool mixed with what might have been blood was coming from his mouth. His back legs were completely motionless now, but occasionally a tremor would run through his entire body, making him whimper even louder. David gently, so gently, reached out and placed his hand on Max's head, the only place that didn't seem injured. Max's eyes fixed on him, and despite everything, despite the unimaginable pain he must have been in, the dog's tail gave the faintest twitch. Just the very tip, the smallest movement. It was Max's way of saying, "I know you're here. I know you're trying to help." That tiny gesture broke something inside David. Here was this innocent creature who had never asked for anything except love and food and the occasional belly rub. This dog who had welcomed David into the family without reservation, who had slept at the foot of their bed every night, who had sat patiently while Jake used him as a jungle gym and practiced her hairstyling skills on his fur. This dog who trusted David completely, who depended on him for everything. And David had failed him in the worst way possible. "I'm so sorry," David whispered, his tears falling onto Max's fur. "You're such a good boy, the best boy. This is all my fault. I'm so sorry." Returned, slightly out of breath. "Sarah's on her way. She said she'd be here in 15 minutes. She knelt down on Max's other side, her experienced nurse's eyes assessing the situation. "David, we need to get him to a vet immediately. Do you know where the nearest emergency clinic is?" Valley View Emergency Veterinary Clinic. It's on Route 42. David had driven past it 100 times, never imagining he'd need it. "That's 25 minutes from here. We need to move him, but we have to be so careful. Do you have a board or something flat we can use as a stretcher?" David's mind was blank. He couldn't think, couldn't process. All he could see was Max's twisted body. All he could hear was that continuous whimpering. "The kid's plastic sled," said suddenly. "In your garage, go get it and grab some towels." David stumbled to his feet, his legs barely holding him. He ran to the garage, nearly tripping over his scattered papers. He found the sled bright red. used for the handful of snow days they got each year, and grabbed an armful of towels from the storage shelf. When he got back, had somehow found a blanket and was laying it out. We're going to slide this under him as gently as possible. On three, okay. 1, 2, 3. They worked together, moving Max onto the makeshift stretcher. Every tiny movement made the dog cry out, and each cry felt like a physical blow to David's chest. Finally, they had him positioned on the sled with the blanket tucked around him. "You drive," said. "I'll sit with him in the back seat and keep him stable." David was lifting the sled when Sarah's car came screeching into the driveway, pulling up at a sharp angle, half on the lawn. She threw open the door before the car had fully stopped, and the look on her face when she saw Max made David want to disappear into the ground. "What happened?" Her voice was high, panicked. "What did you do?" "I didn't see him. The lawn crew must have left the gate open and I was backing up and I didn't see him." The words tumbled out. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." But Sarah wasn't listening. She had fallen to her knees beside the sled, her hands hovering over Max the same way David's had, wanting to touch him but afraid of causing more pain. "Oh, baby. Oh, my sweet boy. What happened to you?" Max's tail did that tiny wag again when he heard Sarah's voice, and that's when Sarah's face crumpled completely. She looked up at David with an expression he'd never seen before, grief and anger and fear all mixed together. "Get him in the car. Now, we're taking him to the emergency vet right now." They loaded Max into Sarah's SUV as carefully as they could, though every movement brought fresh cries of pain from the injured dog. Offered to come with them, but Sarah shook her head. "Thank you, but can you please be here when the kids get home from school? Tell them Max had an accident and we're at the vet. Don't let them see the driveway." David looked down. There was blood on the pavement. Not a lot, but enough. Enough to mark the spot where he destroyed their family's beloved pet through his own carelessness. Sarah climbed into the back seat and David heard her talking softly to Max as he got into the driver's seat. "It's okay, baby. We've got you. You're going to be okay. Just hold on. Please hold on. We love you so much. Just hold on for us." As David pulled out of the driveway, carefully this time of his surroundings, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the mirror. His face was streaked with tears, his eyes red and swollen. Behind him, he could see Sarah cradling Max's head in her lap, whispering to him continuously. The drive to Valley View Emergency Veterinary Clinic was 23 minutes. It was the longest 23 minutes of David's life. David's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Every instinct screamed at him to drive faster, to run red lights, to get Max to help as quickly as possible. But he forced himself to drive carefully, knowing that a sudden stop or sharp turn could cause Max even more pain. In the back seat, Sarah had positioned herself so that Max's head rested in her lap. She kept one hand gently on his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palm, feeling each labored breath. With her other hand, she stroked his ears, soft and velvet, graying around the edges now. She'd touched these ears thousands of times over 13 years, but never like this. Never while wondering if this would be the last time. "Remember when you were a puppy and you got your head stuck in the cereal box?" Sarah's voice was shaky but steady, maintaining that soft, soothing tone she'd used when the kids were Bobbies. "You were so silly, Max. You heard the kibble rattling around in there and you just dove right in. Your whole head disappeared and you were walking around the kitchen bumping into things." Max's eyes were half closed, glassy with pain, but they flickered toward her voice. Sarah took that as encouragement to keep talking. "And remember when Jake took his first steps? You were lying on the floor and he pulled himself up using your fur. You didn't move an inch, not even when he grabbed your tail for balance. You just lay there and let him wobble around, like you knew how important that moment was." A tear dropped from Sarah's face onto Max's fur. She wiped it away quickly, not wanting to upset him. Dogs could sense emotions, she knew. They could feel when their humans were scared or sad. She needed to be strong for him now. "You're going to be okay," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was trying to convince Max or herself. "We're almost there, just a little bit longer. You can do this. You're so strong, Max. You've always been so strong." From the driver's seat, David could hear every word. Each one felt like an accusation, even though Sarah wasn't blaming him. Not out loud, anyway, but he was blaming himself enough for both of them. He'd been checking his phone. That's what it came down to. He'd been distracted for just a few seconds, and in those seconds, he'd nearly killed the family dog. His family's dog. The dog his children loved more than anything in the world. How was he going to explain this to Jake? How was he going to tell them that Daddy had hurt Max because he wasn't paying attention? "There's so much blood," Sarah said suddenly, her voice cracking. "David, there's blood on the blanket. Is that normal? Should there be this much blood?" David glanced in the mirror and felt his stomach drop. The towel they'd wrapped around Max's lower half was stained dark red. "I don't know, just keep pressure on it. Keep him warm. We're only 10 minutes away now." 10 minutes is too long. He's getting worse. His breathing is. Sarah's voice broke completely. "Max, baby, stay with me. Please stay with me. Don't leave us. Not like this. Please, not like this." Max whimpered in response, a sound so pitiful it made David's chest physically ache. He pressed down slightly on the accelerator. Speed limit be damned. He'd pay any ticket, face any consequence. Getting Max to help was all that mattered now. The road ahead blurred as tears filled David's eyes again. He blinked them away furiously. He couldn't afford to lose focus now. Not again. He'd already made one terrible mistake today by not paying attention. He wouldn't make another. "Talk to him," David said, his voice rough. "Keep talking to him, Sarah. Don't let him slip away." Sarah nodded, even though David couldn't see her. Okay, Max, listen to me. Remember when we went to Lake Erie that summer? You'd never seen that much water before and you were so confused. You barked at the waves for an hour straight like you could scare them away. And then that big wave came and knocked you over, and you came running back to us all wet and offended. Despite everything, Sarah felt the tiniest smile touch her lips at the memory. Max had been so indignant, shaking water everywhere, looking at them as if the lake had personally insulted him. And remember's 5th birthday party. You stole an entire hot dog right off little Tommy's plate. His mom was so mad, but you just sat there wagging your tail like you'd done nothing wrong. You got put in timeout in the laundry room, and you howled like the world was ending. Max's tail twitched, just barely, just the tip, but it moved. Sarah's breath caught. "That's right, baby, I'm talking about you. I'm here, we're all here. David's here too. We're taking you to get help." At the mention of his name, David spoke up, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm here, buddy. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But we're going to fix this. The vets are going to fix you up and you'll be chasing squirrels again before you know it." Even as he said the words, David wasn't sure he believed them. He'd seen Max's legs, seen the unnatural angle, seen how much blood there was. But he had to hope. They all had to hope. 6 more minutes, David announced, checking the GPS on the dashboard. "Valley View is 6 minutes away." "He's shaking," Sarah said, her voice rising with panic. "David, he's shaking all over. Is he going into shock? Oh God, I think he's going into shock." "Keep him warm, keep talking to him. We're almost there." Sarah pulled the blanket more tightly around Max's body, avoiding his injured back legs. His whole body was indeed trembling now, fine vibrations running through his muscles. His breathing had become even more rapid and shallow, and his eyes had a faraway look that terrified her. "Max, no, stay with me, stay with me." Sarah's voice was desperate now. "You can't leave, you can't, and Jake needs you, I need you. You're my good boy, my best boy. Remember when I was so sad after the divorce and you put your head on my lap every single night? You saved me then, Max. You saved me. So now I need to save you, but you have to hold on, please hold on." The trembling intensified. Max's eyes rolled back slightly, and for one horrible moment, Sarah thought they were going to lose him right there in the back seat. David, drive faster. Something's wrong. Something's really wrong. David pressed the accelerator to the floor. The SUV surged forward, flying past other cars. A traffic light ahead turned yellow, then red. David didn't slow down. He honked the horn and blew through the intersection, praying no one was crossing. 3 minutes, he said through gritted teeth. Just 3 more minutes, buddy. You can do this. Sarah was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face and dropping onto Max's fur. When you get better, I'm buying you the biggest, most expensive steak they have at the butcher, and you can have the whole thing, no sharing with anyone, and we'll go to the park every single day, and you can sleep in our bed right between us, even though David always complains about the dog hair. Remember how much you love sleeping in our bed. Max's eyes focused on her face for just a moment. In that brief second of clarity, Sarah saw recognition. She saw love, and she saw fear, the same fear that was clawing at her own chest. I know you're scared. I'm scared too, but we're going to get through this together, okay? The family sticks together. That's what we do. And you're part of this family, Max. You've always been part of this family. The buildings around them were becoming more commercial now. They were getting close to the medical district where the emergency vet clinic was located. David's eyes scanned desperately for the sign. There, Sarah spotted it first. Valley View Emergency Veterinary Clinic, right there on the left. David cranked the wheel, pulling into the parking lot faster than he should have. The SUV screeched to a stop right in front of the entrance, blocking the driveway. He didn't care. Let them tow it. Let them ticket him. Nothing mattered except getting Max inside. Before David could even turn off the engine, the automatic doors slid open and 2 vet techs came running out with a wheeled stretcher. They must have called ahead, or maybe they'd heard the urgency in his voice when she'd phoned. Either way, Sarah had never been more grateful to see anyone in her entire life. 13-year-old golden retriever, hit by a car approximately 30 minutes ago. One of the techs was saying into a radio as they approached. Patient is conscious but showing signs of shock. Visible trauma to the lower spine and hind legs. The techs worked with practiced efficiency, carefully transferring Max from the back seat onto their stretcher. Max cried out with each movement, and each cry felt like a nail being driven into Sarah's heart. She wanted to tell them to be more careful, to slow down, but she knew they were doing their best. They were trying to save his life. Ma'am, we've got him now, one of the techs said gently to Sarah, who was still trying to keep her hand on Max as they moved him. We're taking him straight back to the emergency treatment area. You can follow us inside and someone will get his information and medical history. I'm coming with him, Sarah said firmly. It wasn't a question. Ma'am, I understand, but we need space to work. The best thing you can do for him right now is let us do our job. Dr. Martinez is one of the best emergency vets in the state. Your dog is in excellent hands. Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to insist, but David's hand was on her shoulder now, gently pulling her back. Let them help him, he said softly. Come on. Let's go inside and give them the information they need. They watched helplessly as the techs wheeled Max through the automatic doors and disappeared down a hallway marked, Emergency Treatment Authorized Personnel Only. Max's head was turned toward them, his eyes locked on Sarah's face until the very last second, until the doors closed between them. And then he was gone, and Sarah and David were left standing in the parking lot, covered in blood and dog hair and tears, with nothing to do but wait and hope and pray that they hadn't just watched Max alive for the last time. The automatic doors slid shut with a soft whoosh, and suddenly Sarah and David were standing alone in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the emergency veterinary clinic's lobby. The transition from crisis mode to forced stillness was jarring. Just seconds ago, they'd been racing against time, every second critical. Now there was nothing to do but wait. Sarah looked down at her hands. They were shaking uncontrollably, and there was blood under her fingernails. Max's blood. She felt her knees start to buckle, and David caught her elbow, steadying her. "Come on," he said quietly. "Let's get you sitting down." The waiting room was surprisingly busy for a Thursday afternoon. A woman in yoga pants sat in the corner cradling a cat carrier, tears streaming down her face. An elderly man held a small terrier wrapped in a blanket, murmuring softly to it. A young couple sat rigidly side by side, not touching, both staring straight ahead with identical expressions of shell-shocked grief. This was a room full of people living through their worst nightmares, Sarah realized. Every single person here was facing the possible loss of someone they loved. The thought made her feel simultaneously less alone and more terrified. David guided her to a pair of empty chairs against the wall and gently pushed her into one. "I'm going to check us in. Will you be okay for a minute?" Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. As David walked to the reception desk, she wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop the shaking. She was cold suddenly, bone-deep cold despite the warmth of the clinic. Shock, probably. She'd seen enough students come to the school nurse's office over the years to recognize the signs. She closed her eyes and immediately saw Max's twisted body on the driveway. Her eyes snapped open. No, she couldn't think about that. Couldn't replay that image over and over or she'd lose her mind. Instead, she forced herself to focus on the sounds around her. The soft classical music playing through overhead speakers, the hushed conversations at the reception desk, the occasional ding of a bell when someone new entered through the automatic doors, the muffled sound of a dog barking somewhere in the back. Was that Max? Was he scared back there, wondering where she was? Dogs didn't understand medical procedures. They didn't understand that people were trying to help them. All Max would know was that he was in terrible pain, and his family had abandoned him in a strange place full of unfamiliar smells and sounds. "Sarah," David was back, crouching in front of her chair. "They need Max's medical records. Do you have doctor's number?" Sarah fumbled for her phone with trembling fingers. It took her 3 tries to unlock it. She kept entering the wrong password. Finally, she pulled up her contacts and handed the phone to David. "Under vet doctor." David took the phone back to the reception desk while Sarah slumped in her chair. How long had it been since they'd arrived? 5 minutes? 10? It felt like hours. How long before someone came out to tell them something? Anything. A door marked treatment area swung open and Sarah's head jerked up, hope flaring in her chest. But it wasn't about Max. A vet tech called out a name, Mr. The elderly man with the terrier stood up and followed her through the door. Sarah's hope deflated. She went back to staring at her hands. David returned and sat beside her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was thick with things unsaid, accusations, apologies, fears that were too terrible to voice. Finally, David broke the silence. "Sarah, I..." "Don't," Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "Not now, I can't. I just can't right now. I need to say this. I need you to know how sorry I am. I wasn't paying attention. I was looking at my phone and I should have been more careful. This is all my fault." Sarah turned to look at him for the first time since they'd sat down. His face was ravaged with guilt, his eyes red-rimmed and puffy. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the last hour. Part of her wanted to rage at him, to scream that yes, this was his fault, that his carelessness might cost Max's life. But another part of her, the part that had loved this man for 8 years, that had built a life with him, knew that he was already torturing himself more than she ever could. "It was an accident," she finally said. "A terrible, horrible accident, but an accident. If he doesn't make it..." "Don't say that, don't even think that." Sarah's voice turned fierce. "He's going to make it, he has to make it." David nodded, but she could see he didn't believe it any more than she did. They were both just trying to hold on to hope because the alternative was unthinkable. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from "Kids are home. I told them Max had an accident. They want to know if they can come see him. What should I tell them?" Sarah showed the text to David. What do we say? We don't even know what's happening yet. Tell her to keep them there for now. We'll call as soon as we know something. Sarah typed out a response, her fingers still trembling. Please keep them there. We'll call soon. Thank you so much for being there. Response came immediately. Mom, is Max going to be okay? I'm scared. Sarah's vision blurred with fresh tears. How was she supposed to answer that when she didn't know herself? Tell her Max is with the doctors and they're taking good care of him, David suggested softly, reading over her shoulder. Tell her we love her and we'll know more soon. Sarah sent the message, then added, Max is strong, he's a fighter, try not to worry, sweetheart. Another text, this time from Jake, messaged from his phone since he was too young for his own. Tell Max I love him and to be brave. Sarah pressed her hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. David put his arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. For the first time since the accident, she let herself lean into him, let herself accept the comfort he was offering. They sat like that for what felt like an eternity but was probably only 20 minutes. Other people came and went through the waiting room. Some left with their pets, tearful but relieved. Others left empty-handed, their faces blank with shock and grief. Sarah couldn't watch them. Each person who left without their pet felt like a preview of her own future. Finally, the door to the treatment area opened again, and this time a woman in scrubs called out, Family. Sarah and David jumped to their feet so quickly they nearly knocked over the chairs. They rushed to the door where a kind-faced woman in her 50s stood waiting. She wore scrubs printed with colorful paw prints, and her graying hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her name tag read Dr. Martinez, DVM Emergency Medicine. Please come with me, Dr. Martinez said gently. Let's talk somewhere private. She led them down a hallway and into a small consultation room. The walls were painted a soft blue, probably meant to be calming, but Sarah found it oppressive. The room contained a small desk with a computer, 3 chairs, and a box of tissues prominently displayed on a side table. That box of tissues terrified Sarah more than anything else. How many people had sat in this room and needed those tissues for the worst possible reason? Please sit down, Dr. Martinez said, gesturing to 2 chairs while she took the seat behind the desk. Just tell us, Sarah said, remaining standing. Is he alive? Please just tell us if he's alive. Max is alive and stable for the moment, Dr. Martinez said immediately, and Sarah felt her legs go weak with relief. David's hand found hers and squeezed tightly. But I need to be completely honest with you about the extent of his injuries and what we're facing. Dr. Martinez turned to the computer and pulled up a series of X-ray images. Even to Sarah's untrained eye, something was clearly, terribly wrong. The bones didn't look right. There were bright white lines where they shouldn't be, angles that seemed off, fragments that appeared disconnected. Max has suffered severe trauma to his lower spine and pelvis, Dr. Martinez began, using a pen to point at different areas of the X-ray. The impact caused his pelvis to fracture in 3 separate places, here, here, and here. You can see where the bone has completely separated. Additionally, there's significant trauma to his lumbar spine. We're seeing compression here that indicates possible nerve damage. Sarah's hand tightened on David's until her knuckles turned white. But you can fix it, right? Surgery can fix it. Dr. Martinez's expression was compassionate but troubled. That's what we need to discuss. In a younger dog, say, a 2 or 3-year-old, I would say yes, absolutely, we move forward with surgery and the prognosis would be quite good. But Max is 13 years old, which significantly changes the equation. What does his age have to do with it? David asked, though Sarah suspected he already knew the answer. Several things, Dr. Martinez explained. First, there's the issue of anesthesia. Elderly dogs have a much higher risk of complications during surgery, particularly with a procedure as lengthy and invasive as this would be. We're looking at 4 to 6 hours under anesthesia for the necessary repairs. His heart, his kidneys, his liver, All of these systems are stressed during a long surgery, and at his age, they may not cope as well. She pulled up another image, a different angle of Max's pelvis. Second, there's the recovery period. This type of injury requires months of extremely restricted movement. He would need to be confined to a crate, only coming out for bathroom breaks while supported by a sling. No running, no playing, no stairs. For a dog, especially an older dog, that kind of confinement is very difficult. The muscle atrophy alone can be devastating. But if the alternative is letting him die, Sarah started. The alternative isn't necessarily death, Dr. Martinez interrupted gently. There are other options. We can manage his pain with medication and attempt conservative treatment, strict rest, and allowing the bones to heal on their own. It's not common with injuries this severe, but it's possible. What are the chances of that working? David asked. Dr. Martinez hesitated. In my professional opinion, with fractures this extensive, very low, maybe 10 to 15%, and even if the bones heal, he would almost certainly need a wheelchair for mobility for whatever time he has remaining. He'd likely be incontinent. His quality of life would be significantly compromised. The room felt like it was closing in on Sarah. She couldn't breathe properly. Every option Dr. Martinez was describing sounded impossible, unbearable. You mentioned other options, David said quietly, plural. Dr. Martinez's eyes were full of sympathy. She'd clearly had this conversation hundreds of times, but it obviously never got easier. The third option is humane euthanasia. Given Max's age, the severity of his injuries, and the likelihood of a long, painful recovery with an uncertain outcome, many veterinarians would recommend this as the most compassionate choice. The word euthanasia hit Sarah like a physical blow. You want us to kill him. He's alive right now, and you want us to just give up. I'm not saying give up. I'm saying consider what's in Max's best interest. His best interest is to live. Sarah's voice was rising now, edged with hysteria. His best interest is for us to do everything we possibly can to save him. Sarah, David started. No, I'm not listening to this. There has to be another way. There has to be, Dr. Martinez remained calm in the face of Sarah's outburst, her expression patient and understanding. She'd clearly dealt with devastated pet owners before, people who weren't ready to accept what she was telling them, people who needed time to process impossible choices. I understand this is overwhelming, Dr. Martinez said softly. And I want you to know that whatever you decide, there's no judgment here. These are incredibly difficult decisions, and there's no single right answer. Sarah sank into one of the chairs, her anger deflating as quickly as it had flared. She felt hollow suddenly, scraped raw from the inside out. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have yelled, I can't lose him, not like this. You don't need to apologize. Your reaction is completely normal. Dr. Martinez pulled a folder from her desk drawer. Let me give you some concrete information about costs so you can make a fully informed decision. The surgery itself would run between $8,000 and $12,000, depending on exactly what we find once we get in there. Postoperative care, including hospitalization for 5 to 7 days, medications, follow-up x-rays, and physical therapy sessions would add another $5,000 to $8,000. David's face had gone pale, so we're looking at potentially $20,000 total. That would be on the high end, but yes, it's possible. More realistically, you're probably looking at $15,000 to $18,000. Dr. Martinez's tone was matter-of-fact, not apologetic. She was simply stating the reality of veterinary medicine. Sarah's mind was racing, doing quick mental calculations. Their savings account had about $18,000 in it, money they'd been carefully accumulating for 5 years. $8,000 was earmarked for the roof. They'd had 2 different contractors tell them it needed to be replaced before winter, that another season of ice dams and snow could cause serious water damage to the interior of the house. $4,000 was for orthodontic treatment, which the dentist had said couldn't wait much longer without risking permanent damage to her bite. The remaining $6,000 was their emergency fund, the financial cushion that let them sleep at night knowing they could handle unexpected expenses. If they did Max's surgery, they'd be wiping out everything. No roof repair, no braces for, no safety net. "Can we see him?" Sarah asked abruptly. "Before we decide, I need to see him." Dr. Martinez nodded. "Of course, he's in recovery room 2. Follow me." They walked down another hallway, this one smelling strongly of antiseptic, and something else Sarah couldn't quite identify, fear, maybe, or pain, or the particular scent of a place where difficult decisions were made every day. Dr. Martinez stopped outside a door marked Recovery 2 and turned to face them. "He's heavily sedated right now, so he's not in acute pain, but he is aware of his surroundings. Try to stay calm when you're with him. Animals can sense our emotions, and anxiety can make them more stressed." The advice was well-intentioned but almost laughable. How was Sarah supposed to stay calm when her heart was breaking into 1,000 pieces? Dr. Martinez opened the door, and there was Max. He was lying on a padded table under warming lights, an IV line running into his front left leg. His back half was covered with a heated blanket, but Sarah could see the unnatural way his body was positioned, could see the swelling and bruising that had already started to appear on his hips and lower back. His beautiful golden fur was matted with dried blood in places, and there were several shaved patches where the vets had examined him or inserted the IV. But it was his eyes that destroyed Sarah all over again. When Max saw them enter, his tail gave the tiniest wag, just the tip, barely moving but unmistakably a wag. Even drugged, even in terrible pain, even in this strange and frightening place, Max's instinct was to show happiness at seeing his family. "Hi, baby boy," Sarah whispered, approaching the table. She carefully stroked his head, avoiding the areas where she could see scrapes and bruising. "We're here. We're right here with you." Max's eyes were glassy from the medication, but they tracked her movement, followed her face. And in those eyes, Sarah saw the same thing she'd seen on the driveway. "Please, please save me. Please don't let me die like this." David came to stand on the other side of the table, his hand resting gently on Max's shoulder. "Hey, buddy, you're being so brave, so brave." For several minutes they just stood there, both touching Max, neither speaking. The only sounds were Max's labored breathing, the quiet beeping of monitoring equipment, and the muffled sounds of the clinic beyond the door. "I'll give you some privacy," Dr. Martinez said quietly. "Take as much time as you need. I'll be at the nurse's station down the hall when you're ready to discuss next steps." After she left, Sarah finally spoke. "David, we have to do the surgery." "Sarah, I know what you're going to say. I know about the money, but look at him." Sarah's voice broke. "He's looking at us like we can fix this, like we can make everything okay. How can we not at least try?" David was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on Max's face. "What if we try and it doesn't work? What if we spend everything we have and he still dies? Or worse, what if he survives but he's miserable for the rest of his life? Is that fair to him?" "Fair?" Sarah felt anger flaring again. "What's fair about any of this? It's not fair that he got hurt. It's not fair that saving him costs so much money. It's not fair that we have to make this choice at all. But he's alive right now, David. He's alive and he's depending on us." "He's 13 years old, Sarah. Even if everything goes perfectly, and the vet said there's no guarantee it will, he's got maybe another year or two. Is it right to put him through months of suffering for our sake?" "For our sake?" Sarah's voice rose sharply. "You think I'm being selfish? You think I want to watch him suffer through surgery and recovery? I'm thinking about him. I'm thinking about the fact that he's not ready to die." "How do you know that? How do you know what he wants?" "Because I've known him for 13 years. Because I can see it in his eyes." Sarah was fully crying now, not bothering to wipe away the tears. "He wants to live, David. He's scared and he's confused and he's in pain, but he wants to live. And if we choose to let him die because we're worried about money or because recovery would be hard, we're failing him. We're giving up on him when he needs us most. David's own eyes were wet. I'm not trying to give up on him. I'm trying to do what's best for him, even if it breaks my heart, even if it makes me the bad guy. Then let me be the bad guy who chooses to fight, Sarah shot back. Let me be the one who chooses hope over practicality. Max whimpered softly, as if sensing the tension between them. Both Sarah and David immediately turned their attention back to him, their argument temporarily forgotten. "It's okay, buddy," David murmured. "We're not fighting about you. We love you so much." Sarah carefully stroked Max's ears, the way she'd done 1,000 times before. "Remember when I first got you? I was so lost back then. My marriage had fallen apart. I was living in that terrible apartment. I didn't know if I'd ever be happy again. And then you came into my life, this silly puppy with paws too big for your body, and you saved me, Max. You literally saved me." She looked up at David, her face wet with tears. "He was there before you, before the kids, before this whole life we built. He's not just a pet to me. He's the reason I survived long enough to have all of this. I owe him everything." David's face crumpled. "I know. God, Sarah, I know. And this is all my fault. If I hadn't been looking at my phone, if I'd been more careful, we wouldn't be here. Max wouldn't be hurt. So how can I be the one to decide he should die?" "You're not deciding he should die. We're deciding together what's best for him." "But what if we can't agree? What if you want surgery and I think we should let him go peacefully?" It was the question hanging between them, the one neither had wanted to voice. What happened if they fundamentally disagreed about Max's fate? Sarah looked down at Max's trusting face. Even now, even drugged and in pain, he was looking at her with complete faith. He believed she would make the right choice. He believed she would save him. "I can't be the one to give up on him," Sarah said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't live with that, David. Maybe that makes me selfish. Maybe that makes me wrong. But I can't look into his eyes and choose to end his life when there's still a chance he could recover." David was silent for a long moment, then slowly he nodded. "Okay. Okay. Okay, we do the surgery, we spend the money, we try." He looked at Sarah, his face etched with fear and resignation. "But Sarah, you need to understand, if we do this and it goes wrong, if he suffers through surgery only to die anyway, or if he survives but his quality of life is terrible, we might be choosing to prolong his suffering. We might be making the wrong choice. Or we might be giving him a chance to get better. We might be saving his life. Or we might be bankrupting our family for a surgery that doesn't work." Sarah knew he was right. She knew the risks, knew the costs, knew that choosing surgery wasn't choosing a happy ending. It was choosing uncertainty, potential suffering, financial strain, and heartbreak that might be delayed but not prevented. But when she looked at Max, when she saw that tiny tail wag and those trusting eyes, she couldn't choose anything else. "I need to call Dr. Martinez back in," David said heavily. "I need to tell her we want to proceed with surgery before I change my mind." He started toward the door, but Sarah caught his arm. "David, thank you. I know this isn't what you want to do. I know you think I'm making the wrong choice, but thank you for trusting me on this." David looked at her for a long moment, then leaned in and kissed her forehead. "I love you, and I love Max. I just hope we're doing the right thing." He left to find Dr. Martinez, and Sarah was alone with Max again. She laid her head carefully on the table next to his, breathing in his familiar dog smell beneath the antiseptic and blood. "You're going to have surgery, baby boy," she whispered. "And then you're going to get better. You have to get better. We're choosing to fight, so you have to fight too, okay? You have to be strong." Max's tail gave another tiny wag. Sarah closed her eyes and prayed to whatever God might be listening that she was making the right choice, that this wasn't the beginning of weeks of suffering that would end in Max's death anyway, that the look of trust in his eyes would be justified. She prayed that hope would be enough. But deep in her heart, beneath all her determination and fierce love, a small voice whispered, "What if it isn't?" David found Dr. Martinez at the nurse's station, exactly where she said she'd be. She was making notes on a chart but looked up immediately when she saw him approaching. Her expression was carefully neutral, professional. She'd learned not to show expectation or disappointment before hearing what families decided. Every choice was valid. Every choice was heartbreaking in its own way. "We want to do the surgery," David said, the words feeling heavy and final in his mouth. "My wife, we want to give Max a chance." Dr. Martinez nodded slowly, studying his face. "And you? Are you both in agreement on this?" David hesitated. The question was more perceptive than he'd expected. "My wife is certain. I'm trusting her judgment." "Mister, I need you both to be on the same page before we proceed. This surgery is going to be expensive, lengthy, and the recovery will be difficult. If you have doubts—" "I have doubts about everything," David interrupted, surprising himself with his honesty. "I have doubts about the surgery. I have doubts about not doing the surgery. I have doubts about whether we're making this choice for Max or for ourselves. But Sarah is sure and—" he paused, choosing his words carefully. "And Max is her dog. He was hers before he was ours. So if she says we fight, then we fight." Dr. Martinez's expression softened with understanding. "Okay, let me go over what happens next. We'll schedule the surgery for first thing tomorrow morning. I want Max to have tonight to stabilize and for the anesthesia team to review his case thoroughly. We'll keep him on pain management overnight. The surgery itself will take 4 to 6 hours. I'll call you with updates, and you can wait here or go home, and I'll contact you when we're done." "Tomorrow morning," David felt a twist of panic. "Not tonight. Can't you do it sooner?" Max's body has been through significant trauma. Rushing into major surgery right now would increase the risk of complications. He needs these hours to stabilize, and frankly, he needs the fluids and pain management we're providing. Trust me, waiting until morning gives him a better chance." David nodded, trying to absorb all the information. His mind felt foggy, overloaded. "And the cost, how do we?" "We require a deposit of 50% before surgery begins. The remaining balance is due within 48 hours of discharge. We can discuss payment plans if needed, though there is interest involved." 50%. That would be somewhere between $4,000 and $6,000, due by tomorrow morning. David's mind was already working through logistics. He'd need to go to the bank first thing, withdraw money from their savings account, probably stop by the ATM on the way here for the maximum daily limit, then come back to the bank for the rest. "I'll have the deposit ready by tomorrow morning," he heard himself say. "Whatever amount you need." "Good. Now you can stay with Max for a bit longer if you'd like, but then we'll need to let him rest. You're welcome to call any time tonight for updates on his condition, and we'll contact you immediately if anything changes." David thanked her and walked back to the recovery room, his legs feeling like lead. When he opened the door, he found Sarah exactly as he'd left her, head resting on the table next to Max, one hand gently stroking his fur, whispering to him constantly. "It's scheduled for tomorrow morning," David said quietly. "First thing, they want him to stabilize overnight." Sarah lifted her head, her face blotchy and swollen from crying. "Tomorrow? That's so long from now. What if something happens tonight?" Dr. Martinez said this gives him a better chance. "They'll monitor him constantly, and they'll call us if there are any changes." David moved to stand beside her, his hand joining hers on Max's side. "They need a deposit in the morning, $4,000 to $6,000. Sarah nodded, not even flinching at the number. Money had become abstract, meaningless in the face of Max's life. "We'll figure it out. We always figure it out." They stood there in silence for a few more minutes, both lost in their own thoughts, both touching Max as if they could transfer strength to him through their hands. "We should go home," David finally said. "The kids need to see us. They need to know what's happening. I don't want to leave him. Sarah's voice was small, childlike. What if he thinks we abandoned him? He won't think that, and we'll be back first thing in the morning before his surgery. But right now and Jake need us too. Sarah knew he was right. Their children were at home, terrified and confused, being watched by a neighbor, waiting for news about their beloved dog. They needed their parents. Reluctantly, Sarah leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to the top of Max's head. I'll be back in the morning, baby boy. You're going to have surgery tomorrow and then you're going to get better. Be brave for me, okay? Be strong. Max's tail did that heartbreaking tiny wag one more time. The drive home was silent. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, beautiful in a way that felt almost offensive given the day they'd had. How dare the world be beautiful when Max was lying in a veterinary hospital, broken and in pain? When they pulled into their driveway, Sarah's stomach turned. There was still a dark stain on the pavement where Max had been lying. The blood had dried into the concrete, a permanent reminder of the worst moment of their lives. I'll clean that up later, David said quickly, seeing where she was looking. Tonight, after the kids are asleep. Met them at the door before they could even get their keys out. Her face was creased with worry. How is he? I've been keeping the kids calm, but they're desperate for news. He's alive, Sarah managed. He's having surgery tomorrow morning. Oh, thank God. The kids are in the living room. I made them dinner, mac and cheese. I hope that's okay, but they barely ate. They've just been sitting there waiting for you. Sarah and David found and Jake exactly where had said, sitting on the couch, pressed close together, both with red-rimmed eyes. The moment they saw their parents, jumped up and ran to them. Is Max okay? Can we go see him? When is he coming home? Jake was right behind her, his 7-year-old face streaked with tears. I want Max. I want to see Max. Sarah knelt down and pulled both children into a tight hug. Over their heads, she saw David quietly thanking and showing her out. Then he came and sat on the floor with them, all 4 of them in a huddle in their entryway. Max is at the animal hospital, Sarah began carefully. He got hurt pretty badly today. Daddy accidentally backed over him in the driveway. You hurt Max, pulled back, looking at David with an expression of betrayal that made him flinch. It was an accident, sweetheart, David said, his voice rough. A terrible accident. The lawn people left the gate open and Max wandered into the driveway and I didn't see him. I would never hurt Max on purpose. You know that, right? Studied his face for a long moment, then slowly nodded. But you're supposed to look where you're going. That's what you always tell us. The simple, devastating truth of that statement hung in the air. David had no defense, no excuse that would make sense to his 9-year-old daughter. You're right. I should have been more careful, and I'm so sorry that I wasn't. Is Max going to die? Jake asked bluntly, and Sarah felt her heart crack all over again. Max is going to have surgery tomorrow, Sarah explained. The doctors are going to fix his broken bones, but it's going to be a big surgery and he'll need a long time to get better. But he will get better, right? His voice was desperate, pleading. The doctors can fix him. Sarah and David exchanged a glance. How much truth did you tell children in situations like this? How did you balance honesty with hope? The doctors are going to do everything they can, David said carefully. But Max is an old dog and he's very hurt. Even with surgery, it's going to be hard for him. He might not ever be the same as he was before. What does that mean? Jake demanded. Will he be able to play? Will he be able to run? Probably not for a long time. Maybe not ever the way he used to, Sarah admitted. He might need a special wheelchair to help him walk. He might need a lot of help from us. That's okay, said immediately. We can help him. I'll help him every day after school. I'll read to him and brush his fur and feed him his dinner. Please, Mom, please let them do the surgery. Please don't let Max die. Sarah pulled close again, breathing in the strawberry scent of her daughter's shampoo. "They're doing the surgery tomorrow, baby. We're going to give Max every chance we can." His whole body sagged with relief. Jake crawled into David's lap, something he rarely did anymore. He usually insisted he was too big for that kind of thing. But tonight, he was just a scared little boy who needed his father. "Can we go see him?" Jake asked. "Before his surgery?" "Yes," David promised. "Tomorrow morning, before the surgery, we'll all go see him together. You can tell him you love him and that you want him to be brave." They ordered pizza for dinner. Nobody had the energy to cook, but just like had said, the kids barely ate. They picked at their slices, pushing the cheese around, asking questions about Max over and over. What time was his surgery? Would it hurt? Would he be scared? When could he come home? Sarah and David answered as best they could, but the truth was they didn't know most of the answers themselves. They were navigating this crisis moment by moment, making decisions that felt impossible, hoping desperately that they were doing the right thing. After dinner, Sarah suggested they make cards for Max. It would give the kids something to do, something constructive to focus their anxiety on. Disappeared to her room and returned with her art supplies, colored markers, glitter glue, stickers, construction paper. They spread out on the living room floor, the same floor where Max would normally be lying, waiting for dropped food or stray pets. His absence was a physical ache, an empty space that felt wrong. His card was elaborate. She drew Max surrounded by hearts with a speech bubble that said, "Get well soon." In careful block letters, she wrote, "Dear Max, you are the best dog in the whole world. Please get better. I promise to take care of you forever and ever. Love." Jake's was simpler. He wasn't much of an artist yet. He drew a stick-figure dog that could have been any animal, colored it yellow for Max's golden fur, and wrote in his messy first-grade handwriting, "Max, I love you. B." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she watched them work, pouring their love and hope onto paper, as if their words and pictures could somehow heal Max from miles away. "What are you and Dad going to write?" asked. Sarah picked up a piece of construction paper, her hand hovering over it. "What did you say to a dog who'd been your constant companion for 13 years? How did you fit all that love, all that history, into a card?" In the end, she kept it simple. "Max, you saved me once. Now it's my turn to save you. Fight hard tomorrow. We'll be there when you wake up. Love always, Sarah." David's hand was shaking as he wrote his own message. "Buddy, I'm so sorry. I would give anything to undo what happened. Please forgive me. Please fight. We need you, David." They put all 4 cards carefully into a folder to bring to the hospital in the morning. Then Sarah insisted the kids get ready for bed, even though it was still relatively early. They needed rest, needed whatever escape sleep could provide from this nightmare day. Went without her usual protests about bedtime, which told Sarah exactly how scared her daughter really was. Jake asked if he could sleep in his room, and Sarah agreed immediately. Tonight was not a night for anyone to be alone. After the kids were settled, Sarah and David sat in their bedroom, the door closed, both of them staring at nothing. "I need to go to the bank first thing tomorrow," David said finally. "Get the deposit money. I'll take the day off work, call in sick. The kids should probably stay home too. They're in no state to go to school. Said she could watch them if we need her to." They were discussing logistics, practical matters, because those were safe. Those didn't require them to confront the bigger, scarier questions. What if the surgery didn't work? What if Max died on the operating table? What if they were spending their family's entire savings on a futile effort? What if this decision destroyed their marriage? "David," Sarah said suddenly, "if something goes wrong tomorrow, if Max doesn't make it, I don't want you to blame yourself. This wasn't your fault." "Yes, it was. It was an accident, a terrible, horrible accident, but an accident. I was looking at my phone, Sarah. I was distracted. That makes it my fault." Sarah didn't have an argument for that because part of her agreed with him. Part of her was angry at him, even though she knew that anger was irrational and unfair. But another part of her knew that accidents happened, that humans made mistakes, that David would never have deliberately hurt Max. "We'll get through this," she said instead. "Whatever happens, we'll get through it." But even as she said the words, she wasn't sure she believed them. That night neither Sarah nor David slept. They lay in their bed, holding hands in the darkness, listening to the house settle around them. Every creak, every sound made them think of Max, his paws clicking on the hardwood floors, his jingling collar, his contented sighs as he settled into his bed. The absence of those sounds was deafening. Around 2 a.m., Sarah's phone rang, and her heart nearly stopped. Dr. Martinez's name appeared on the screen. "Hello?" Sarah's voice was panicked as she answered, David sitting up immediately beside her. "Is Max okay? What happened?" "He's okay," Dr. Martinez said quickly. "I'm sorry to call so late, but I wanted to update you. Max had a difficult evening. His pain levels were elevated and we needed to adjust his medications. But he's stable now and resting comfortably. I just wanted you to know before morning." "Thank you," Sarah breathed. "Thank you for calling." After she hung up, she relayed the information to David. They lay back down, but sleep was even more impossible now. Max was suffering. Even with medications, even with the best care, he was in pain. Were they doing the right thing? The question circled through Sarah's mind like a vulture, over and over, with no good answer. The alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., but Sarah had been awake for hours, watching the numbers on the clock change with agonizing slowness. Beside her, David stirred. He hadn't slept either. They'd both spent the night staring at the ceiling, lost in their own spirals of worry and regret, occasionally reaching for each other's hand in the darkness. Sarah got up immediately, her body moving on autopilot. Shower, clothes, coffee that she made but couldn't drink. Her stomach was twisted in knots, and the thought of putting anything in it made her feel nauseous. David was already dressed when she came downstairs, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open, staring at their bank account. His face was gray, haggard. He looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. "I transferred money into checking," he said without looking up. $6,000. That should cover the deposit with some cushion in case it's on the higher end." Sarah nodded. She wanted to say something, "Thank you," or "I'm sorry," or "Are we making a terrible mistake?" but the words stuck in her throat. "I'm going to wake the kids," she said instead. And Jake were both already awake, lying in bed together, whispering to each other in the pre-dawn darkness. They stopped talking immediately when Sarah opened the door, their faces turning toward her with identical expressions of fear and hope. "Is it time to see Max?" asked. "Yes, baby, get dressed. We need to leave in 20 minutes. The children moved with unusual speed and silence. No arguing about what to wear, no dawdling, no complaints. They were downstairs within 10 minutes, both clutching the cards they'd made for Max the night before. The drive to the veterinary hospital was silent except for the GPS directions and the sound of Jake quietly crying in the back seat. Held his hand, trying to be brave, but Sarah could see in the mirror that her daughter's face was pale and frightened. They arrived at Valley View Emergency Veterinary Clinic at 6:47 a.m. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few cars belonging to overnight staff. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It should have been beautiful, but all Sarah could think was, this might be the last sunrise Max ever sees. Inside, a different receptionist was at the desk, a young woman with kind eyes who smiled sympathetically when she saw them. "You must be the family. Dr. Martinez is expecting you. She said you could go back to see Max before his surgery. Room 2, down that hallway." They walked down the corridor as a family, David carrying Jake, who'd suddenly become too scared to walk on his own. Pressed close to Sarah's side, her small hand gripping her mother's tightly. Dr. Martinez met them outside the room. She looked tired. Sarah wondered if she'd been here all night or if she'd gone home and come back early. Either way, her scrubs were fresh, her hair neatly pulled back, her expression calm and professional despite the early hour. "Good morning," she said quietly. "Max had a stable night after we adjusted his medications. He's alert this morning and has been given a light sedative to keep him calm before surgery. You can go in and see him, but we'll need to prep him in about 15 minutes. Can we give him these?" Held up her card. "We made them for him." Dr. Martinez's expression softened. "Of course, I'll make sure they stay with him during recovery." She opened the door and there was Max. He looked worse in the morning light than he had the evening before. The bruising had developed fully overnight, dark purple and yellow marks spread across his hips and lower back. His eyes were glassy and unfocused from the sedative, but when he saw them, his tail gave that tiny, heartbreaking wag. "Max!" Jake squirmed out of David's arms and ran to the table, but Sarah caught him before he could throw himself at the dog. "Gentle, baby. We have to be very gentle. He's hurt, remember." Jake nodded solemnly and approached the table slowly, carefully. He placed his card next to Max's head and very softly patted the dog's paw. "Hi, Max. I love you. You have to be brave today, okay? The doctors are going to make you better." Was crying as she placed her own card down. "We made these for you, so you know we're thinking about you during your surgery. Mom and Dad made cards too. See? We all love you so much." Sarah had to look away, the sight of her children trying so hard to be brave for their dying dog too much to bear. She felt David's hand on her shoulder, grounding her. They took turns saying goodbye to Max, whispered secrets in his ear, promises about all the things they'd do together when he got better. Jake sang him the silly song they'd made up together when Jake was learning to talk. David apologized again, his voice breaking, telling Max what a good dog he was, what a brave dog, what a loved dog. Sarah went last. She leaned close to Max's face, looking into those trusting brown eyes that had seen her through so many years, so many changes, so much life. "You saved me once, remember?" she whispered. "When I was so sad and broken, you saved me just by being you. You gave me a reason to get up every morning, to keep going, to believe that good things could still happen. And they did. I met David. We had and Jake. We built this beautiful life. And you were there for all of it, Max. Every single moment you were there." She paused, a sob catching in her throat. "So now it's my turn to save you. I'm giving you this chance to fight to come back to us, but baby, if it's too hard, if you're too tired, I need you to know that it's okay. It's okay to let go. We'll be okay. It'll hurt, God, it'll hurt so much, but we'll be okay. So you do what you need to do, all right? You fight if you can and rest if you can't. Either way, know that you were loved. Know that you were the best dog, the best friend, the best part of our family." Max's tail wagged again, stronger this time, and he managed to lift his head just enough to lick her hand. Sarah broke down completely, her sobs shaking her whole body. Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway. "I'm so sorry, but we need to start prepping him for surgery now. The anesthesia team is ready." Sarah wanted to scream. She wanted more time. She wanted to rewind to yesterday morning when Max was fine, when their biggest worry was who got the last Pop-Tart. But time only moved forward, relentless and uncaring. They each gave Max one more gentle touch, one more whispered, "I love you," and then they had to leave. And Jake clung to Sarah as they walked out, both crying openly now. David stopped at the reception desk to pay the deposit, $6,000 that disappeared from their account in seconds. In the waiting room, they found a corner with 4 chairs arranged in a square. They sat, the children between their parents, and waited. There was nothing else to do. Dr. Martinez had said the surgery would take 4 to 6 hours. Sarah checked her phone, 7:23 a.m. So Max would be in surgery until at least 1:00 p.m., possibly 3:00 p.m. An eternity. "I'm hungry," Jake said quietly around 8:30, and Sarah realized none of them had eaten breakfast. "I'll go find something," David volunteered, clearly grateful for something to do. He came back 20 minutes later with bagels and juice boxes from a coffee shop down the street. The kids ate mechanically, not tasting anything. Sarah couldn't eat at all. Other people came and went through the waiting room. A woman with a cat carrier, a man with a limping Labrador, an elderly couple supporting a small white dog that could barely walk. Each person's tragedy playing out in parallel, each person facing their own impossible decisions. At 9:15, Sarah's phone rang. Dr. Martinez. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. "Hello. Mrs., I wanted to give you an update. We've successfully induced anesthesia and Max is stable. We're beginning the surgical procedure now. So far, everything is going according to plan." "Thank you," Sarah managed. "Thank you for calling." She relayed the information to David and the kids. So far, so good. Max had survived the anesthesia, which Dr. Martinez had said was one of the biggest risks. That was something. That was good. But they still had hours to go. Pulled out a book and tried to read, but Sarah noticed she never turned the pages. Jake played games on David's phone with the sound off, his face blank and distant. David stared at the wall, his jaw clenched, lost in his own thoughts. And Sarah prayed. She wasn't particularly religious, hadn't been to church since she was a child, but she prayed anyway. To God, to the universe, to whatever force might be listening, please. Please let Max survive this. Please let him come back to us. Please don't let this be for nothing. 10:47 a.m. Still no update. 11:32 a.m. Sarah went to the bathroom just to move to do something. When she came back, David shook his head. No calls. 12:15 p.m. They should have heard something by now, shouldn't they? What if something had gone wrong? What if Max had died on the operating table and Dr. Martinez was trying to figure out how to tell them? At 1:03 p.m., Sarah's phone finally rang again. "Mrs., this is Dr. Martinez. I wanted to update you on Max's progress. The surgery is taking longer than anticipated. We found additional complications once we got in there. Some internal bleeding we needed to address, and the spinal compression was more severe than the X-rays showed. We're making good progress, but we're probably looking at another 2 hours minimum." Sarah's heart sank. More complications, more severe damage, more time under anesthesia for an elderly dog whose system was already stressed to the limit. But he's okay, he's still alive. He's stable, his vitals are good, all things considered. We're just being very thorough to give him the best possible outcome. After she hung up, Sarah delivered the news to her family, started crying again. Jake climbed into David's lap and buried his face in his father's chest. David's arms came around their son, but his eyes were distant, defeated. They waited. 2:47 p.m. 3:15 p.m. 3:52 p.m. Finally, at 4:18 p.m., nearly 9 hours after Max had gone into surgery, Dr. Martinez emerged from the treatment area. She was still in her surgical scrubs, her mask pulled down around her neck, her face exhausted. Sarah, David, and Jake all jumped to their feet, crowding around her, searching her face for any clue about what she was going to say. Dr. Martinez took a deep breath, and in that moment before she spoke, Sarah saw their entire future balanced on a knife's edge. Everything they'd been through, everything they'd sacrificed, every prayer and hope and desperate wish, it all came down to whatever words were about to come out of Dr. Martinez's mouth. "Max made it through surgery," Dr. Martinez said, and Sarah felt her legs nearly give out with relief. "He's alive and he's in recovery, but," and here her expression turned serious, "we need to talk about what happens next." The word "but" hung in the air like a guillotine blade, poised to drop and sever their fragile hope. Sarah felt David's hand find hers, squeezing so tightly it almost hurt. and Jake pressed against their parents, forming a united front against whatever terrible news was coming. "Can we sit down?" Dr. Martinez gestured toward a private consultation room off the main waiting area. Her tone was gentle but serious, the voice of someone who'd delivered difficult news thousands of times but never got used to it. They filed into the small room, the same room where they'd sat yesterday making impossible decisions. The box of tissues was still there on the side table, and Sarah had a terrible feeling they were going to need them again. Dr. Martinez settled into her chair and pulled up images on the computer, surgical photos that made Sarah's stomach turn. She could see metal pins and plates, raw tissue, the inside of Max's body laid open and exposed. "The surgery itself was successful," Dr. Martinez began. "We were able to reconstruct his pelvis using surgical plates and pins. We addressed the spinal compression and repaired the internal bleeding. From a technical standpoint, everything went as well as we could have hoped." "Then why do you look like you're about to give us bad news?" David asked, his voice tight. Dr. Martinez's expression was pained. "Because during the surgery, we discovered the extent of the nerve damage. Max's spinal cord sustained significant trauma. Even with the decompression we performed, there's substantial damage to the nerves that control his hind legs and bowel function." Sarah felt her breath catch. "What does that mean?" "It means that even if Max recovers from the surgery, and that's still if there's a very high probability that he'll never regain full function of his back legs. He'll likely need a wheelchair for mobility, and the nerve damage affecting his bowel control means he'll probably be incontinent for the rest of his life." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. Wheelchair, incontinent, never walk again. "But he'll live?" asked in a small voice. "Even if he needs a wheelchair, he'll still be alive." Dr. Martinez turned to look at the 9-year-old, her expression incredibly gentle. "Honey, he's alive right now, yes, but the next 72 hours are critical. Elderly dogs often struggle with recovery from major surgery. There's risk of infection, blood clots, organ failure, complications from the anesthesia. And even if he makes it through all of that, we're looking at months of intensive care. He'll be in severe pain. He'll need round-the-clock monitoring. Every bathroom break will require you to support him with a harness while he eliminates, and even then, he may not have control. He'll be confused and frightened and uncomfortable." "We can do that," Sarah said immediately. "We can take care of him, whatever he needs." Dr. Martinez was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Mrs., I need you to really think about what that means. Not just for you, but for Max. Imagine being in constant pain, unable to move without assistance, unable to control basic bodily functions. Imagine the frustration, the fear, the loss of dignity. And Max is 13 years old. Even in the absolute best-case scenario, you're talking about putting him through months of suffering for maybe another year or two of life. Life that will be fundamentally different from what he knew before." "So what are you saying?" David's voice was sharp. "That we just put him down, after everything, after 9 hours of surgery and $6,000. I'm saying that sometimes the most loving choice is to acknowledge when fighting causes more harm than good. Max survived the surgery, which is remarkable, but survival isn't the same as quality of life." Sarah felt like she was underwater, drowning. This couldn't be happening. They'd chosen surgery. They'd fought for Max. He'd survived. This was supposed to be the good news, the relief, the beginning of recovery. Not this. Not another impossible choice. "I want to see him," Sarah said suddenly. "I need to see him right now. He's still under the effects of anesthesia, and he's heavily medicated for pain. I don't care, I need to see him." Dr. Martinez nodded slowly. "Okay, but please prepare yourselves. He doesn't look like the Max you know." She led them back to the recovery area, to a different room this time. And there was Max. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. Dr. Martinez hadn't been exaggerating. Max barely looked like himself. His entire back half was wrapped in bandages with drainage tubes snaking out from beneath them. He was hooked up to multiple monitors, IVs running into both front legs. His breathing was labored, mechanical sounding. And his eyes, his beautiful, expressive eyes, were glazed and unfocused, rolling slightly in his head. "Max," Sarah approached the table slowly, terrified of what she was seeing. "Baby, it's me, it's Sarah." There was no response, no tail wag, no recognition. Max just lay there, breathing those terrible ragged breaths, his body occasionally twitching involuntarily. "Is he in pain?" Jake whispered, and Sarah realized her 7-year-old son had gone completely pale. "He's on very strong pain medication," Dr. Martinez assured him. "He's not feeling much of anything right now." "He looks like he's dying," said bluntly, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, he looks like he's dying." Sarah wanted to argue, to insist that Max was going to be fine, that this was just temporary, that he'd wake up and be himself again. But looking at him now, at this broken, drugged, barely conscious version of the dog she loved, she couldn't make those words come out. Because was right, Max looked like he was dying. "How long until we know?" David asked quietly. "Until we know if he's going to make it or not." "The next 72 hours are critical, like I said. If he survives that, we'll have a better sense of his prognosis." But Mr. and Mrs. Dr. Martinez paused, making sure she had their full attention. "I want you to really consider what I said earlier. Even if Max survives, the life he's facing is going to be very difficult, for him and for you. And you need to ask yourselves honestly, are you fighting because Max wants to live or because you're not ready to let him go?" The question landed like a bomb in the middle of the room. Sarah opened her mouth to answer. Of course they were fighting for Max. Of course this was what he wanted. But the words died in her throat. Because looking at him now, at his suffering, at the tubes and bandages and monitors, at the way his body occasionally spasmed with pain despite the heavy drugs, she wasn't sure anymore. Was this mercy, or was it cruelty disguised as love? "I need some air," David said abruptly, and walked out of the room before anyone could respond. Sarah found him 5 minutes later in the parking lot, leaning against their car, his head in his hands. She could see his shoulders shaking. He was crying again, harder than she'd ever seen. "David, what have we done?" His voice was raw, broken. "Sarah, what have we done to him?" "We tried to save him. We gave him a chance." "No," David spun to face her, his face contorted with anguish. "We gave ourselves a chance. We made him suffer through 9 hours of surgery so we could feel like we tried, like we didn't give up. But look at him. That's not Max in there. That's not our dog. That's just pain and suffering, and we did that to him." "He survived the surgery," Sarah insisted, but even she could hear how hollow the words sounded. "Surviving isn't living. Dr. Martinez is right. Even if he makes it through the next 3 days, what kind of life is he going to have? He's going to be in pain, confused, unable to walk, incontinent, dependent on us for everything, and for what? So we can have a few more months with him, so we can feel better about ourselves." Sarah felt anger flare hot in her chest. "So this is my fault now. You agreed to the surgery. You signed off on this too. Because you were so certain. Because I trusted you when you said we had to fight for him. But maybe," his voice broke completely, "maybe we should have let him go yesterday when he was comfortable, when he could have died peacefully instead of like this." The words were like a slap. Sarah took a step back, her own tears coming faster now. "How dare you? How dare you put this on me? I made the choice I thought was right. I chose hope. I chose to believe Max deserved a chance. And look where that got us. $6,000, and Max is worse off than he was yesterday. We didn't save him, Sarah. We just prolonged his suffering because we were too selfish to let him go." They were both yelling now, all the stress and fear and guilt of the past 24 hours exploding between them. Other people in the parking lot were staring, but Sarah didn't care. "I did what I thought was right for Max," she screamed. I'm sorry if that wasn't good enough for you. I'm sorry I chose wrong, but at least I chose to fight instead of just giving up. Sometimes giving up is the kindest thing you can do. Sometimes love means letting go. Well, I'm not ready to let go. I'm not ready to lose him. This isn't about you. This is about what's best for Max. And you think you know what that is. You, who ran over him in the first place. You get to decide what's best for him now. The moment the words left her mouth, Sarah knew she'd gone too far. David's face went completely white, then red. He looked at her like she'd stabbed him. "You're right," he said, his voice eerily calm now. "This is my fault, all of it. I hurt him. I pushed for the surgery because I felt guilty, and now he's suffering even more because of me. Because I'm a failure who can't do anything right. David, I didn't mean. I'm going home." He pulled out his car keys. "I can't be here right now. I can't look at Max knowing I did this to him. I can't listen to you defend decisions that are making everything worse. I can't." "David, wait." But he was already getting in the car, was already pulling out of the parking space. Sarah watched him drive away, her anger evaporating instantly, replaced by crushing guilt and fear. She just said something unforgivable in a moment of pain, and now her husband was gone and she was standing in a parking lot with their 2 terrified children inside, and Max was dying, and everything was falling apart. She went back inside to find Jake sitting with Max, both children eerily quiet, was holding Max's paw gently, talking to him in a whisper. Jake was just staring, his face blank. "Where's Dad?" asked when Sarah came in. "He went home. He needed a break." "Is he mad at you? We heard you fighting." Sarah sat down heavily in a chair, feeling about 1,000 years old. "Yeah, baby, we're scared and sad, and sometimes when people are scared and sad, they say things they don't mean." "Is Max going to die?" Jake asked, still staring at the unconscious dog. Sarah opened her mouth to say no, to offer reassurance, to maintain the hope she'd been clinging to so desperately. But looking at Max now, really looking at him, she couldn't do it. She couldn't lie to her children about this. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I really don't know, sweetheart." And that, finally, was the truth. That night Sarah sat alone in Max's recovery room long after visiting hours had ended. The night staff had taken pity on her and let her stay. And Jake were home with again. Sarah had called her in tears, begging for help, and the kind neighbor had come immediately. David still wasn't answering his phone. So Sarah sat with Max through the long, dark hours, watching monitors, listening to his labored breathing, and facing the truth she'd been running from since the moment the accident happened. She'd made the wrong choice. She'd chosen surgery because she couldn't bear to lose Max, because she'd needed to feel like she'd done everything possible, because giving up felt like betrayal. But she hadn't been thinking about what Max needed. She'd been thinking about what she needed. And now Max was suffering for it. "I'm sorry," she whispered to him, stroking his head with trembling fingers. "I'm so sorry, baby. I thought I was saving you. I thought I was being strong. But I wasn't listening to what you needed. I was only listening to what I wanted." Max didn't respond. He just lay there, breathing those terrible mechanical breaths, lost somewhere between life and death, fighting a battle Sarah had chosen for him without asking if he wanted to fight. At 3 a.m., Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway. "You should go home, Mrs. Get some rest." "I can't leave him. He doesn't know you're here right now. The medications." "I'll know I'm here. That matters." Dr. Martinez studied her for a long moment. "Can I ask you something? And I want you to really think about your answer." Sarah nodded. "If Max could talk, if he could tell you what he wanted right now, what do you think he'd say?" Sarah closed her eyes, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks, because she knew the answer. She'd known it all along if she was honest with herself. Max would ask her to let him rest, to stop fighting, to stop the pain and the fear and the confusion. He'd ask her to let him go peacefully, surrounded by love, instead of dying slowly in a sterile hospital room, alone and afraid. "I made a mistake," Sarah whispered, "didn't I?" Dr. Martinez's expression was infinitely compassionate. "You made a choice that came from love. There's no shame in that. But sometimes the most loving choice is also the hardest one." Sarah looked down at Max, at this shell of the dog who'd once been so vibrant and full of life. And finally, she let herself see what she'd been refusing to acknowledge. This wasn't mercy, this was selfishness, and it had to end. "What do we do now?" Sarah asked. "We wait out the 72 hours like planned," Dr. Martinez said. "But I think you should prepare yourself and your family for the possibility that the kindest thing might be to help Max pass peacefully if he makes it through, to spare him the months of difficult recovery ahead." Sarah nodded, unable to speak through her tears. She'd fought so hard to save Max. She'd spent thousands of dollars, sacrificed her family's financial security, alienated her husband, put her children through trauma, all in the name of love. But love, she was learning, wasn't always about holding on. Sometimes love meant opening your hands and letting go, even when it broke your heart into a million pieces.